Bish, Cakes, EB, and JP. That is the foursome joining us right now on the BetQL Guest Hotline. It's our pal John Keim. He covers the Commanders for ESPN.com. You know, John, we just did our Howell eval. Everybody gave him an F. You can't give him anything else than an F. So let's start with the Keim eval of the defense. And I just want to set this up that I saw on social media a lot of people defending the defense, saying the offense put them in bad spots, and that's all true. However, they gave up 212 yards of offense in the first half, almost 400 yards of offense in the game, had 0 sacks. I see 1 quarterback hit, and they allowed 9 for 15 on third downs. I can't give them a pass, John.
No, you can't. And, you know, the hard part, you know, the funny thing is, because after that game, obviously the offense was a big story because of all the turnovers, the sacks, you know, it's, with a young quarterback, you're going to get all this stuff. With the line they have, you're going to get all this stuff. So the natural point to start is there. And had the offense done a better job, the defense is in a better situation, right? I mean, if you convert it, et cetera. However, you know, the other part of that, too, is early on, Josh Allen made plays that only he or Patrick Mahomes can make. And now I'm not going to give him a pass just because of that, because, like, you can still play well. I mean, you know, it's not like he's doing that. Well, does do that a lot of weeks, but you can still play better. And they weren't getting enough pressure on the 4-man fronts. Allen, what did I have? His air yards per attempt were the most by far this season. And, you know, his average air yard attempts of 20 or plus yards was at almost 20%. To give you some perspective, his previous high was 9, a little over 9 in the first game. So in other words, they were pushing the ball down the field. And that you can do that when you're getting some time to throw, and when he buys himself that time too, right? And there are a couple of times you're like, oh, they're close to something and they don't get it, but you got to, and that's where it starts, right? You've got to finish. They had a line that has received a lot of praise over the first couple of weeks, and they weren't able to get to him this time. Or when they did get to him, he was able to make a play still out of it. But then you look at, well, the coverage, et cetera. And so that's something that I want to dig into deeper later or today when I can go back and watch, like what went wrong there, what can you fix there, because, you know, it did get away from him. But, again, 16 points through 3 quarters, they kept him in the game, and then it just, you know, not that they were dominant, but it was still 16 points through 3. And so, but there are things that you can clean up without a doubt, and you have to look at it like, what does it mean going forward?
John, do you think some players and coaches possibly take offense to the measuring stick comment from Ron heading into the game? Because when you say that, you're basically saying, well, we're not as good as this team. We're just hoping we can, you know, keep up with them. But did that cause, you know, some ruffled feathers leading up to the game?
Not that I heard, because some players would say, yeah, they were curious where they stood. But, you know, I mean, I'm not a huge believer in the measuring stick stuff anymore, because they've won some games, you know, where that was a really good win going to Philadelphia.
They beat the Eagles. They beat teams you're not expecting to beat.
Right.
Sure.
So to me, the measuring stick is the season, right? I mean, and what do you do off of a game like that? That's the measuring stick of who you are. Like, if you win a big game and then you go out and lose it 2 in a row, well, okay, the measuring stick game was great and you lost the next 2. Or if you go lay an egg like they did yesterday, how do you respond to that? So to me, that's the measuring stick of a team, is what happens after that game. So they've had those big wins. They haven't done enough with them. And so even if they had beaten Buffalo yesterday, yeah, it's like, hey, are they on a different trajectory? But you still have to go out then, because if let's say they beat Buffalo and they go to lose Philly and then lose at home to Chicago, well, what did that measuring stick game mean? It didn't mean anything. It just means that on one Sunday you could beat that team, but its consistency is the measuring stick.
I would agree. So Sam Howell's 4 picks obviously is, you know, you can't turn the ball over 4 or 5 times and win. Certainly not against a good team.
No.
But the 19 sacks is alarming. It's by far the most in the league by, I think, 6 sacks.
Yeah, it's bad.
When you're talking to these people, how much of those sacks are on the line versus Sam?
Oh, I mean, obviously there's always a definite split. And now, you know, and here's the problem too. It's not just the sacks, it's the under duress.
Right.
And there are a lot of times where like you're watching the first drive and he makes a couple good throws, but a defensive tackle is almost in his lap.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're getting that, so it's not just the sacks. And there are some times where there's a pressure. For example, sometimes a guy's just getting beat, and you see that. Sometimes it's a guard getting pushed back. It could be Wiley. It could be Leno. There was one time, though, like where, a chip, for example. Like, I think it was down in the red zone. Mm-hmm. And, this is actually on the 14-yard run that he had.
Oh.
Yeah, no, on the 18-yard run that he had, and actually was a good play by Howell to get rid of it or to make something out of it. But the pressure comes because Brian Robinson's going out in the flat where he goes to chip the end. And in doing so, he pushes them to the inside, and it's why sometimes tackles don't always like that chip because it pushes them inside, and now he's got a pressure, but it led to an 18-yard run. But you see that. So I think it's a combination of it, and sometimes, you time it, and it's like, okay, how long is he standing there before he's throwing? It's like it's 3.3 seconds. That's a long time, and that so there's I mean, I hate to say it, but it is a combination of everything. And sometimes I'm watching like, well, stop the film, and is anybody even close to being open? And sometimes the answer is no there as well. So why is that? And, I don't think – the problem is there's not an easy fix, and a lot of it does – I think the easier thing to look at is like, well, Howell can improve, and he can improve in certain areas that can help this situation, right? And that's why, sometimes I focus there because I think that's a natural area for improvement because you're not bringing in new linemen at this point
mm-hmm.
who are going to do anything. So how can you improve? And it's him going through, things a little bit quicker, maybe getting off something a little bit sooner, getting to a check down like that first sack, which took him out of, the 8-yard sack on that first drive. The drive was really good. He had a couple of really nice throws. Can you get to a little check down to De'Ami Brown on the side in the flat, maybe get 5 yards, maybe more. But can you get to there sooner to offset that, and then you're still in good shape? Instead, you get sack, interception. So, so there's little things like that. But again, you can't put it all on him because there are times where, again, even when he's completing balls, there's somebody in his lap.
Mm-hmm. John, what can Bieniemy do to help him? I was very complimentary, and again, I don't know anything. But I was very complimentary of Bieniemy last week. I just loved the way they responded and everything. But this week I feel like, we know he's under duress here. We know the offensive line is struggling. The running backs, everybody helping with the chip in is not going. Why are there not more sprint rollouts? Why are there not more quick passes?
Yeah.
Why did the screen game, why was it so great last week, not this week? I assume that Buffalo studied it all week and they were prepped up for it. But what could Bieniemy do to help Hal? Obviously, Hal's got to learn, but the offensive coordinator can help him too.
Sure, of course. And they had more than a few quick throws, right? And you get 4 or 5 yards. It's hard to live off that, but it does help. Mm-hmm. Changing the launch angle does help. And the sprint rollouts. The problem with the sprint rollouts, you can do a couple of those, but you do too many, you're cutting down the half of the field.
For sure.
But they had one where it was a 9-yard gain. And
right.
so
you
can change. Right. No, I agree. And so you can change the launch angle, whether it's play action, right? Some of those RPOs are designed to help slow
Why
things.
Does he always hold, in the RPO game, it seems like Hal always gives it to him. He's good enough to take it himself.
It's actually the other way. Well, the RPO is not designed for a quarterback run. It's designed to either the running back run or you're throwing the ball.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. I mean, that's what an RPO is. And so a lot of times what he is doing is he's keeping it and throwing it.
Well,
right?
why not he keep it and run?
Well, that's a zone read then.
All right,
so that's a little bit
okay.
different. So, and that's fine. But here's the other thing. I mean, the kid's getting hit a lot.
Yeah.
So
I
don't know. There are a couple times where I think there was, sometimes you could probably do that because it's Kirk Cousins used to do that too, right? And because it's a surprise. But yeah, you could do that once in a while. I don't think that's something that's going to sustain them. I'm not sure that that's going to necessarily, because the zone read is about the run game, not the pass game. So but as far as the pass game goes, I mean, here's the other thing. If I had the answers, I wouldn't be talking.
I'm just asking generally.
But generally, I think, you can change the launch angle. You can run the ball a little bit more because they were having success there. And putting them in positive situations. consistently. And so that's another way that you can help. And the screen game works.
Why did it not work yesterday?
Well, that's a good question. And so part of it, I don't know, sometimes it's hard because you don't want to sound like you're making excuses, because I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
But when you analyze it, like the Broncos ends really get upfield fast, and they were doing a lot of chipping and all that. And so it set up the screen pretty well. But I don't, when you saw these guys, they had, there's some zone coverage, and it's a little bit harder to do it against that. And I think the Bills did a good job on defense. So I think it kind of goes back to what you said is, okay, clearly they're going to be ready for that.
And maybe the Broncos defense stinks. They gave up 70 yesterday.
Oh, listen, that's the other part of the equation.
Right.
And, so that they clearly have some issues on that defense. And it's funny because I thought that defense was going to be good because they were pretty good last year, and now they're not. I mean, it was
That was embarrassment.
So, John,
so there's a lot of things that are just like, and here's the other part that it's hard to answer now is like, what is real for this team at this point? And because you're in a new offensive system with a young quarterback, where is it going to go? And it's hard to say, because after last week, it's like, all right, it's going pretty well. And after this week, it's like, oh, they got to clean this stuff up.
Right. So next week it's a daunting opponent, and it's almost even better that it's that, because you're really going to see what you'll learn and everything. And I assume that Philly will just mimic a lot of it, right? They're going to bring pressure like crazy.
Correct. Yeah.
And they're very good. So what will our response be? What will, like, in an average offensive mind, like, what would the response be? How do you combat what is coming?
Well, that's a good question. Here's the other thing, too. Like, they will – if I'm teams, I'm sending a lot of pressure up the middle, which is a lot of what they're doing, too, and some overloads, because – they're doing a good job containing in the pocket. But for me, like, I'm going to see, have the Eagles improved against the run? How much? I mean, I know they have the defensive tackles and, et cetera, but, where are they at with it? And because I want to reduce the pressure on this and try to continue to consistently get favorable down and distances to throw. But the first sack is a 1st and 10. It's not like that's a bad situation to throw in, right?
Well, the other thing, John, is I did the math on this. So Sam has 99 pass attempts. He's been sacked 19 times. He's also run 5 times. So that's 118, right?
Right.
The running backs and Curtis Samuel, if I want to throw him in, have run the ball 59 times. Now, some of that is game circumstance, but Bieniemy, particularly in the first half, he is pass happy.
No, it's right. Yeah, and that's one of the things. That's why I say to me. And Brian Robinson was running pretty well yesterday, so that's one of the things. You're right, though, and it's funny because even on that first drive, it was like I was looking at it, like, well, how is the balance here? And not that you have to be 50-50. That's not how this works, right? Because you can run different styles of passes, different style of runs. But it's more, usage of players and reducing situations, I guess. But it was, so sometimes it gets skewed because, now it's a sack, now you got to throw again. Oh, now you got a sack again, now you got to throw again. And what had been a drive that had some decent balance was now out of whack because of that. However, I still agree. I mean, even in the first game, I remember talking to someone at halftime, like, I'd like to see more Brian Robinson. And then the second half against Arizona, you got more Brian Robinson. So, I think there's some things, too, that with Bieniemy is also learning Sam Howell and this passing offense. What can they handle and what can they not? When you're coming from Kansas City, where obviously some of the stuff is going to work, what works now and what doesn't, against what front, against what look. And maybe you have to alter your philosophy a little bit because of what's been going on. And again, like I think Robinson has been running well I thought, yesterday, and then also, especially the second half of last week, and even against Arizona until they were just killing the clock. That's what I say. I think that to me is one way to, just a few more runs, keep it a little bit more off balance, or maybe reduce some of that pressure on protection and the pass game.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's a frustrating game. I was hopeful that we would be able to be competitive, maybe surprise them. I did not see it going that way. Even though I knew Buffalo was likely a better team, I did not see it going down.
Well,
like that.
You don't expect NFL teams to get completely blitzkrieged like that.
Yeah.
Right. No, that
You know
that
what I
was
mean?
that was not what I expected either, because you thought. I mean,
Especially with the front four that Washington has. They were no impact.
Yeah, and I thought certainly thought they'd be better offensively.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that, because there's a lot to like about Sam Howell. And, you knew through the first two games that people got tired of hearing about, it's not just holding the ball long, waiting for a big play. It's like it's knowing when to get off a guy to get to your check down or to get your second read, et cetera. This is something he's got to go through. And even some of the Bills players were talking about that. They knew that they could take advantage of that. And so it is something that other teams know, and so they tend to rush accordingly. You see guys like backside ends are looping around the tackles, knowing that there's a good chance they can get behind the tackle and get back into play because he's going to be there. And so those are little things that he can improve on, and that I think he will. I think he's a smart player, and he'll see this stuff too. But that part surprised me. The pressure didn't, because the pressure's been there in 2 games. So any pressure there, that's going to happen. And it's like, how do you offset that? But that's where Bieniemy's now going to have to.
This is a big test for Bieniemy too.
Oh, it's a huge
test.
It's a big test. It's a big test for all of them. And absolutely. So.
All right, thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Guys.
Thanks, buddy.
Got to run. That's John Keim, covers the Commanders for ESPN.com. Remember.